Geek Therapy Radio.
Welcome to Geek Therapy Radio. I am, of course, your mental curator, Johnny Hemberger. I should say the Geek Therapy Radio podcast, as this is not for air on the radio show that airs at 10 p.m. Saturday nights, and as of January 26, 2020, it also airs at 6 p.m. Sunday evening, so I'm very excited about that. Okay, so in the podcast today, I want to do something a little bit different that I don't think that I've done before on the show, and that is at least open the show with a specific product review. Now, if a lot of you listening to the podcast are subscribed to the Geek Therapy Radio YouTube channel, you've seen me upload a very brief video about this product a few months ago. Really, it was an experimental video on all fronts. I basically screen captured off my phone. But the point of the video was to showcase the 8BitDo Zero. 8BitDo is one of my favorite third-party Bluetooth controller manufacturers. They make more than just Bluetooth controllers. They make USB controllers as well. 8BitDo is not paying me at all to review this product, the 8BitDo Zero. They've come out with a new 8BitDo Zero 2. Regardless, right now I'm reviewing the first generation of 8BitDo Zero. But they're not paying me to do it. They didn't send me anything for free. I could call it a big fat piece of crap if I want to, with zero remorse or zero regard. But luckily, it's not a piece of crap. I spent my own money on this, $20 to be exact. And the reason I'm reviewing the first generation of 8BitDo Zero is that it is not too much different from the Zero 2. And I think that either one of them that you pick up, you will be very, very pleasantly surprised. So just to start at the basics, it's a Bluetooth controller and it pairs to anything. It pairs to your Nintendo Switch. This is the same for the 8BitDo Zero 2. It pairs to your Nintendo Switch. It pairs to your Android or iOS smartphone. It pairs to Windows, pairs to Mac. It's just a basic Bluetooth controller at its heart, which makes it extremely compatible. So there's no denying it. It's a very, very small controller. As a matter of fact, if you're an adult man or an adult woman, hold up your thumb. It's about as big as your thumb. That is how big this controller is, but don't let that dissuade you too much. There is a use case scenario for this, and I've been meaning to make a video, or dabbling in my mind about making a video specifically about the perfect mobile gaming setup, and it was going to be very much centered around the 8BitDo Zero. Once I heard or saw that 8BitDo was releasing a mini controller like this, I got very excited because 8BitDo, like I mentioned earlier, makes the best, in my opinion, third-party console and PC and Android or whatever you want to call it, or whatever you want to use it for, controllers ever. Like they make the best third-party Switch controllers, they make the best third-party Super Nintendo controllers, the best third-party Sega Genesis controllers, all sorts of different controllers they make. Even controllers that, sorry, it's so small I dropped it. Even controllers that are compatible, like I mentioned, with old Super Nintendos, with old Sega Genesis, and they convert it to wireless. Basically, you put the transceiver into the port of your Super Nintendo or Sega Genesis, and now you have a wireless Sega Genesis controller or Super Nintendo controller. But let's stick to the 8BitDo Zero. Again, it costs $20. Even the 8BitDo Zero 2 costs $20. It's very cheap and very, very worth it. So let's talk about that use case scenario. A few moments ago, I mentioned that it is part of my perfect mobile gaming setup. There's a little asterisk by that because it depends on your definition of ultimate mobile gaming setup, because this controller, let's not beat around the bush, it's tiny, and I would not recommend it for prolonged gaming sessions. Again, no beating around the bush. Your hands are cramped. While the controls are great, and I'll get to the controls in a moment, you just can't get around the fact that it's small and that you're going to have to manipulate your hands in a way that works best for you. I found a way that works best for me. I kind of hold it like this. If you're watching the YouTube video, you can see what I'm doing, but I kind of hold it like that. I can fire off Hadoukens in Street Fighter with the best of them. I've always said that my test for a controller is going to be centered around the Hadouken test. How easy is it to go from down to forward and throw and punch and throw a fireball in Street Fighter 2? I think that's a good baseline benchmark for any controller. That separates the men from the boys in terms of the D-pad and even analog sticks, even though I don't like playing fighting games with analog sticks. Most fighting games anyways, especially not Street Fighter. So how good is the analog stick on the 8BitDo 0 and 02? Wonderful. For what it is, for the size that it is, it's about the size of a dime. It is exquisite. The inputs are very, very tactile. You have about 2 millimeters of travel, which is bonkers. MacBooks don't even have 2 millimeters of key travel. So the fact that the buttons have 2 millimeters of travel in the direction pad, D-pad is 2 millimeters of travel, and the shoulder pad's about, it feels maybe 1 millimeter of travel of the shoulder buttons. They're very clicky, very responsive. Every button on here is so clicky and responsive. But that D-pad is absolutely ideal for 2D platformers. You'll notice that there is no analog stick, no analog function on the 8BitDo 0 or 02. So that means games that rely on analog movement or analog input of any kind aren't the best. Yes, you can map analog movement to the D-pad in most games, but you're not getting the 360 degrees of rotation, 360 degrees of control. With a D-pad, you're getting 8 ways of control. So you're getting up, diagonal right, up, right, right diagonal down, down, and so forth. So you have 8 areas of movement with a D-pad, and those 8 movements on the D-pad for the 8BitDo 0 and 02 are just exquisite. Absolutely exquisite. And again, consider that this thing cost $20. The buttons, the face buttons, feel wonderful. It really is amazing what 8BitDo has been able to do in such a small form factor with the face buttons, with the D-pad, with the shoulders, even the start select button feel great. The whole unit is very sturdy. I've dropped this thing many times. It's very durable. It has a keychain loop. You can actually use this as part of your keychain. So my use case scenario is this as far as traveling, and this is why I consider it kind of my ultimate mobile gaming setup, is the fact that, you know, in jeans that they have that, it used to be a tiny pocket, like on the right pocket of most jeans that has a smaller pocket inset in that big pocket. Used to be that you would carry things like your lighter. Back when everybody smoked, you'd have a lighter inside there. This fits beautifully in that little cigarette lighter pocket, that little pocket in your jeans. It was built for this. I actually, in that little pocket, I keep guitar picks, I keep a USB thumb drive, and I keep this 8BitDo 0 controller with me at all times. That's why it makes it the best, in my consideration, in my opinion, the best ultra mobile gaming setup. I have this paired to my in my case, my Android Samsung Galaxy Note 9 smartphone paired over Bluetooth. The case, the little thin case that my Samsung Galaxy Note 9 has on it, has this kickstand that kicks out, so I can lay it on a table and just have it oriented towards my face, and I have my little 8BitDo controller with me at all times. I'm playing games on the go, and I always have both of these with me. That's why this is the ultimate mobile gaming setup, in my opinion. I always have my phone with me, and I always have my 8BitDo controller with me, 8BitDo 0 controller with me. It is awesome for that, going to a wedding, going to some sort of function, and you need a little me time, a little escape off to a side room where you can play a game, or just be Just be baller status and go to some sort of function or gala or event and be playing video games with your smartphone and 8BitDo Zero controller or 02 controller anywhere you're at. They're always with you. You can they're easily pocketable. Like I said, the 8BitDo Zero controller and 02 goes perfectly in that little lighter pocket on jeans. And it's just a wonderful thing to have with you at all times. Now, let's get to the obvious. Like I mentioned, it's very small. You don't want it for prolonged gaming expenditures, let's just say. The best Bluetooth controller, in my opinion, bar none, is the Xbox One S controller. It pairs to Android, it pairs to Windows, I know for sure, pairs to all sorts of devices. The controls are buttery smooth. I will say almost perfect. It is the best Bluetooth controller, in my opinion, all around. But you can't exactly just throw it in your pocket. You don't have an Xbox One S controller with you all the time, unless you're with me, like me, and I always have one in my backpack because I basically bring my backpack everywhere. But if I'm wearing a suit or a tuxedo or anything like that, I can't bring my backpack everywhere. I can't bring my backpack into a function. Sometimes you can't bring backpacks to work or what have you. I always have the 8BitDo Zero controller in my pocket. And for that fact, it is wonderful. It is wonderful to bang out a few minutes of a 2D platformer. It's wonderful to bang out a few minutes of a fighting game. I could say you could play on this maybe in my scenario, my personal use case scenario, 15 minutes or so is about where I have to call it. I'm 6'1". My hands aren't the biggest in the world, but they're still quite cramped on this controller over long periods of time. But for quick gaming sessions, you're waiting for an oil change at the mechanic. Perfect. The 8BitDo Zero controller is perfect in those type of use case scenarios. So that was my review of the 8BitDo Zero. We'll continue on with the podcast here. The review also is part and parcel with the 8BitDo Zero 2. There's really not much of a difference between them. None that I can tell. They are both wonderful products. If you spent $20 on either of them, I think you'll be very, very happy. Just keep everything I said in mind, that while the controls are great, while it's built very sturdy, and while 8BitDo is a wonderful manufacturer of third-party controllers, 8BitDo Zero and 8BitDo 02 are very small. So just keep that in mind. All right, let's move on with the podcast. So moving on, something that I wanted to touch on, and again, I try to keep these podcast evergreen, but this story is, not time sensitive, but it happened recently. January 14th, as of recording the podcast today, marks the official end of Windows 7 support from Microsoft. So that begs this question. A few months ago, just a couple months ago, here at work, here at iHeartMedia, the IT people came in and we all updated to Windows 10 for better, for worse, what have you. Depends on your opinion of Windows 7, depends on your opinion of Windows 10. Windows 10 hasn't been the biggest, nothing compares to the train wreck of Windows 8, and nothing compares to the train wreck of Windows Vista. Now, there may be some people out there that like Vista for whatever reason. I haven't heard many people that say, you know what, Windows 8 was my favorite Windows or Microsoft operating system. I haven't heard any of that. I'm not saying that it doesn't exist. Maybe you listening, you said, oh, I liked Windows Vista, or I liked Windows 8. Windows Vista, at a time when RAM was at a premium, was a RAM hog. It was not very efficient use of system memory. That was the biggest culprit for Windows Vista. It was being pushed out to computers that weren't able to handle the increased overhead that Windows Vista brought with it. So anyways, back to Windows 7. It officially ends support. Microsoft officially has cut off Windows 7 from its support, meaning it doesn't get any more updates, doesn't get any more firmware patches. It doesn't get any more fixes, or I'm not sure if it's still going to get updates to its antivirus. Maybe somebody listening can reach out to me and let me know. I would imagine end of support means end of Windows officially supporting antivirus within Windows itself, Windows 7 itself to be specific. but there's not going to be any more updates coming down, not any more patches. But all that to say, just because Microsoft is officially ending support for Windows 7 doesn't mean that your computer's going to explode. It doesn't mean that you can't still install Windows 7, can't still use Windows 7. And there might be some schools of thought that might consider that, Windows officially ending support for Windows 7, that means that Windows 7 could theoretically be more modifiable to users' taste when they know that Windows isn't or Microsoft isn't running in the background to basically undo changes that they've done. I'm not sure how big of an issue that is for most people, but some more tinkery types of the operating system might breathe a sigh of relief now that Microsoft is ending support for Windows 7. But the question is this, and through any channel that you can reach out to me, email geektherapy@iheartmedia.com. You can contact me through my website, geektherapyradio.com, Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, Twitter, all that good stuff. Let me know if you still use Windows 7 on a daily basis. Let me know if you still voluntarily use Windows 7 on a daily basis. And in that vein, what is the oldest version of Windows that you still use on a daily basis? Lots of people still adore Windows XP. Lots of Microsoft users that you'll talk to will say that Windows XP was the best operating system since maybe 3.1 or maybe since Windows 98. I don't know. That's kind of personal opinion, up to you. But by and large, the vast majority of people you ask, what is your favorite Windows? What do you think was the best Windows operating system? They'll say Windows XP was the best. Then people will say Windows 7 after XP. Usually, for the most part, most people after they say Windows XP will say Windows 7 was the second best. And a lot of people will also say Windows 7 was the best Microsoft operating system. Universally agree that Windows 8 was a dumpster fire, and Windows 10 is less of a dumpster fire. That's completely subjective. That's completely up to your opinion, but I still want to know, do you still use Windows 7? Do you have any plans to upgrade, air quotes, from Windows 7 to Windows 10? What operating system are you using currently? That's what I want to know. And I mean on a daily basis, to get real work done, to connect to the internet daily. Yes, you can still connect to the internet on Windows 98. I highly doubt most people listening are still rocking Windows 98 daily. Maybe your grandmothers are still using Windows 98, although I don't see a big use case scenario for that scenario, other than grandma or grandpa just hasn't updated their PC since 1999, and they're still using some old version of Internet Explorer that doesn't support HTML anymore. They just refuse to change. They're still using some sort of email client that still works with Windows 98. Windows 98 is rare. I have one laptop with a Pentium 3 in it that has Windows 98 on it. Windows 98 SE Special Edition or Second Edition. I forget what it is. Is it Special Edition or Second Edition? I want to say it's Windows 98 Second Edition. Anyways, Windows 98 running on that Pentium 3 laptop just for retro gaming purposes. And I can get off on a huge tangent on why I think Windows 98 SE is one of the best operating systems for a DOS gaming PC. I can talk to Clint on LGR, Lazy Game Reviews, more about that. Maybe I will, coming up here in the future. But yeah, so I use Windows 98 occasionally. So anyways, I might not be the best person to ask with what operating system do you use on a daily basis, because I take that back. Most of us use multiple operating systems on a daily basis. We use our PC, whether that's a Mac or a Windows-based PC or Linux. There may be a few freaks and geeks out there, great show by the way, who use Linux. I use a version of Linux on my Raspberry Pi. I'm getting on a tangent. That's not even what I meant. Most of us use multiple operating systems a day. Whether your main PC is Mac or Windows-based, we have a phone in our pocket. Most of us have a smartphone, so we're either using Android or iOS, Apple iOS. So we use multiple operating systems a day regularly. The operating systems you use on an ATM machine or various other kind of transaction machines may be based on Linux or might have Android running underneath, or might have some version of whatever running underneath. I don't know off the top of my head, but the point is we use different operating systems day to day. But as far as your PC, as far as your laptop, you're either using Windows or Mac mainly. I use a TOS. What is TOS? Atari's, on the Atari 520 ST TOS, a Trammell operating system. Mark Trammell came over from, was it from Atari over to Commodore, and then to Atari. I think came from Commodore. I'm getting all mixed up now. I'm getting sidetracked. That's just off the top of my head. I know Mark Trammell came from somewhere to Atari, and TOS, Atari's operating system back in 1985, was called Trammell Operating System, or the operating system, whatever you want to call it. Anyways, I'm a special case. Those of us who are into vintage computing, we don't count when it counts to what operating system do you use day to day. Usually it's going to be Mac, or it's going to be Windows. So, Windows 7. Are you sad that it's ending official support from Microsoft? Are you happy that it's ending official support from Microsoft? What do you think? Geek Therapy at iHeartMedia.com, geektherapyradio.com. There's a contact section in there. And I think, honestly, that's all I wanted to talk about today. There's so much stuff going on. I thought about talking about the PlayStation 5 today. I thought about talking about the leaked Samsung Galaxy S20 smartphone, and that it comes with up to 16 gigabytes of RAM. 16 gigabytes of RAM in a smartphone. I guess I will get off on this little tangent here. I'll cram it into this episode of Geek Therapy Radio because I don't like talking about smartphones so much, because for the most part, I think it's a pretty, boring topic. To me, my own opinion, we're all geeks about something. I appreciate the technology of smartphones. I think they are a marvel of modern technology. I love all the emulators I can put on my Android smartphone. But by and large, year-to-year advancements in smartphone technology aren't that fascinating to me. But I will say that on the surface, that 16 gigabytes of RAM in the newest leaked Samsung Galaxy S20 seems excessive on the surface. And for 99% of people, I would say that it is excessive. The base model apparently comes with a plebeian, I love that word, plebeian, a pedestrian 12 gigabytes of RAM for the base model. So you wonder to yourself, because it's the first question that I ask myself, who in the flying heck would need 12 gigabytes to 16 gigabytes of RAM in a smartphone? And then it dawned on me. Samsung has this wonderful feature on their flagship smartphones called Samsung DeX, which basically turns your phone into a desktop PC based on Windows, not Microsoft Windows, but based on multitasking, opening up multiple windows within Samsung DeX and using a mouse and keyboard with it and a computer monitor or TV, and basically turning into a desktop class PC in that regard. And if you're opening up multiple applications with your phone in DeX mode, and you have social media up here, you have Instagram up here, you have Facebook up here, you have Microsoft Word up here, you have Chrome or Firefox going over here, or both. You start opening up multiple programs, and you can start opening up like sound recorders and Skype and things like that. You start having several programs open at once using your smartphone in a desktop PC configuration. That's where the increased RAM comes into play. That's where 12 gigabytes comes into play. That's where 16 gigabytes comes into play. Now, you could argue certainly that 8 gigabytes would get you by in that kind of use case scenario. But again, it just depends on how many applications you're opening, how many Chrome tabs you have open. The point is that modern Samsung phones especially have such high amounts of RAM is for that DeX mode. So remember that when you see people on YouTube, or you listen to different reviews whenever the S20 comes out and they talk about the ungodly amount of 12 gigabytes of RAM or 16 gigabytes of RAM, and they have no clue why any phone would need that other than bragging rights, you'll know because you heard it on Geek Therapy Radio, and of course, any other tech enthusiast worth their salt, that the 12 and 16 gigabytes of RAM have everything to do with using your phone in a desktop PC type of configuration where you have multiple applications open and you're using multiple applications at the same time. That's why it's high RAM. It is serving a purpose. So I think we'll end Geek Therapy Radio for today. There, I hope you enjoyed it. My little product review of the 8BitDo Zero. Again, no one paid me for that. I bought it with my own money, and you know, even if they did pay for the review or did send me a product, I would rip it to shreds. That's my solemn promise to you, is if I find major faults with a product, whether it's a paid endorsement or otherwise, I will tell you, and I will tell sponsors who reach out to me, hey, review my product. Not sponsors, that's a different thing. But a company that sends me anything, if a company sends me a laptop or a company sends me any sort of peripheral, any sort of anything, TV, whatever, I will make it known to them that, hey, if there is a glaring fault, if it is my opinion that at least my opinion, that there's a glaring fault with your product, I will tell the people who listen to my show or watch my YouTube channel about that glaring fault. The pros and cons. I will always talk about, paid or not, faults with the product, and they can choose not to let me review the product, or it's their move from there, but I'm always going to be honest in my product reviews. I paid my own $20 for the 8BitDo Zero, and I think it is very, very much worth it for that ultra portable gaming scenario. It is a wonderful device. Thank you for listening to Geek Therapy Radio podcast tonight. Tell your friends about Geek Therapy Radio if you enjoy it. Thank you so much from the bottom of my heart for your support. Here's the encouragements. Once again, I forgot to put it at the beginning. I'll get there one day. We're all geeks about something, so embrace your inner geek. Know that you are worthy of love, both giving and receiving love, and equally as important, sometimes more so important, know that you are worthy of your own love and of your own self-respect. Oftentimes it is hard to believe the demons in our head telling us lies that we aren't worth it, that we aren't good enough to try something, that we aren't good enough to see something through. That's just a lie. You can hear other people say it, but the loudest voice is the one in your head. It's your own self-doubt. It's a liar. You are worth it. You are worthy of your own self-respect. You are worthy of your geekly endeavors. You are worthy of making a difference, a positive difference in this world. You are capable. You are worthy of doing so. Thank you for listening to Geek Therapy Radio, and I will catch you tomorrow.
Therapy Radio, Saturday night at 10 on KPRC 950. Or listen anytime on our iHeartRadio app.